Hello and welcome to the second episode of DPS podcast, Here We Go Fregeau. I'm Maria Robertson, Director of Community Engagement, and joining me is the Superintendent of Decatur Public Schools, Dr. Paul Fregeau. Hello, Dr. Fregeau.
Hello, Maria. How are you doing today?
You know, it's been a great day. The fall weather is coming, and I love this time of year.
Best time of year for me.
It is. Well, last time we concluded with our We've concluded our August boundary discussions with the community, and DPS ultimately held these open discussions with the public in order to gain input from our families on how school boundary lines should be changed based on the merging of several of our elementary schools in the BOLD facility plan.
Yes, appreciate all the people that went to those meetings and provided us input. And just so people will understand, we'll have other opportunities in September and October to if you weren't able to make those first meetings in August.
And they've been very well perceived. I know Dr. Bouchard is also trying to grab parents at football practices and cross-country elementary meets, so we're really trying to meet the parents
Where
and
they're
trying
at.
to get their feedback for
That's
that.
right.
So yeah. Okay, so let's start things off. Can you first explain what school boundary lines are and how they are determined by DPS?
Well, school boundary lines are established so you can determine how many families a neighborhood school can serve. So you establish those boundaries based on your building capacity would be the plan. And we haven't looked at ours in over 20 years. So with that timeline as well as the combining of schools, it's time to look at those again.
And for clarification, these are the boundary lines within Decatur Public School District. We're not changing any city boundaries.
No city boundaries, or we're not impacting our boundaries with Argenta, Maroa, Mount Zion, our neighboring districts. Because we've had a few people from those arenas reach out to us as well. So let's clarify, we're talking our internal boundary lines.
Right. Okay. So how does the BOLD plan complicate our school boundary lines?
Well, I don't know if I would say complicate, but what we have is we are combining schools, so the current boundary lines will no longer serve their purpose. So while we're looking at that, we need to address the whole district, try to get rid of the pod system. If families aren't familiar with that, you may live next to Oak Grove, but if Oak Grove's at capacity, we'll say, hey, welcome to the neighborhood at Oak Grove, but we're going to send your kid to Franklin or some other building, and that's not neighborhood friendly. And so our goal is, with the combination of the buildings, to design school boundaries that doesn't happen anymore.
That's great. Our August community boundary discussions have completed, and what are some of the most brought up topics and concerns by families in those meetings regarding the boundaries?
As I just talked about, the concern about making sure our neighborhoods are served properly by the capacity of the school, but also that we look at diversity, socioeconomic status, and those type of things as we're putting our school boundaries together.
Yep. I had the pleasure of attending some of those, and there was one parent that recommended just removing school boundaries completely. What are your thoughts about that idea?
Haven't thought about that in depth. That is always an option we can look at. Things that come to mind, though, is we would have to have very strict timelines for parents to designate their choice, and we'd also have to have choice 1, 2, or 3, because regardless if we have school choice or not, buildings still have a certain amount of capacity.
Right.
So that would have to be addressed. Also, transportation. How would that look if 5 kids on the street go to 5 different schools?
Right.
How do we transport kids in an efficient fashion that gets them to school on time? So those are 2 things that come to mind right away when I talk about school choice.
Okay. I know that there's perception out there that DPS hears community input, but ultimately makes their own decision. Is there more to the community's feedback than maybe they are seeing?
I would hope so. I can't address what's been going on in the past, whether that's true or not, but if that's a perception, we have to battle that by having these meetings and listening to the feedback and providing the board with that type of feedback, and let the board make the most informed decision they can based on a wide variety of input from the community.
Right. As of right now, is the district leaning toward considering any major changes for school boundaries?
I think they've looked at a variety of options. I mean, they've looked at just eliminating, if Parsons and Stevenson are being combined, just eliminate that middle boundary and just make that. They've looked at redistricting the district in a way that incorporates all facets of the inner city, and they've looked at a variety of options. I think all things are on the table, and we still have 2 months of meetings before we make our final recommendation.
What is the financial impact to the district with boundary changes?
Well, the ultimate impact down the road will be our operating costs will be decreased. We're going to be going from 22 buildings to 17 buildings. When you look at districts around the state, I know people are probably tired of me saying this, but districts with 22 buildings have 13 to 15,000 students. We have just under 9,000 students. It's not an efficient way to operate a district by having that many buildings. And it also, we'll talk about this in more detail later, is the services are spread out over 22 buildings that our kids need, and that's not good either.
Right. Can the district expect any busing costs to increase based on the idea of children living further away from the schools due to these boundary changes?
We're not anticipating increased busing costs because if you design the boundaries in a proper fashion where it serves the neighborhood, the kids will, instead of going from one side of town to the other because the two schools in between are full, you'll be going to the school closest to your home.
Right.
So, but we still always have, the community needs to understand we have our magnet schools, and kids come from all over the district for those buildings. So that cost has already been absorbed by the district moving forward. So
Gotcha.
I think it'll be budget neutral overall.
Very minimal impact?
Yes.
Okay. At the end of the day, the Board of Education has the final say. How does the process of creating a boundary proposal work, and what is the district's current progress on that proposal now that our August community boundary meetings have ended?
Well, Tuesday night, Dr. Bouchard and the members of the committee will be making a update. It's not a proposal yet. It's just an update of the feedback they've been getting so the board can start to garner that information. And then in, I believe it's November or December, a final recommendation will be made after the September-October meetings. And then the board will think about that a month and vote on it in January and February for the final boundary, the final establishment of boundaries.
And that committee has been meeting since the beginning of February, January of this year, as I understand. So they've been really hammering down some good conversation.
They got on a bus and drove to different neighborhoods, and they've really looked at things in a very detailed manner.
Yep. Good. So shifting gears a bit, concerns of the bold plan are beginning to rehash among our community with the changing of school boundaries. With the combining of several elementary schools, will we see any larger class sizes?
Well, the teachers are going to follow the students is always the message I try to help people understand. But we are adding on to the buildings where they're being combined to absorb that capacity.
Gotcha.
And we're also using the demographer's information that to really get down in a granular status on how many kids are in each neighborhood so we can establish boundaries that make sense for each building.
Okay. So there's data behind some of these decisions.
Very much so. We have a demographer's projection for the next 10 years, and they've been very close these first 2 years.
Wow.
So we're very confident in the projections moving forward.
Okay. There's also still some confusion over choice of school closures. Some schools like Baum Elementary will be closing in favor of moving to Muffley, which doesn't yet have air conditioning installed. Can you explain how the administration decided between which schools to close when combining?
There was a variety of factors, but when you get down to the basics, you have to look at which buildings have the lowest cost to do the additions.
Right.
And so when you look at those type of things, the buildings we chose have the best cost-benefit analysis for putting the additions on. We still think Baum will have some role in our district. We just haven't defined that yet. We have a lot of future plans, innovation centers, consolidating central office, and some other things that we've mentioned. And we don't think Baum will disappear. It may be repurposed.
Gotcha. And thinking about Muffley, there's those natural resources within walking distance to that school with the Children's Museum and the Scoville Zoo.
And all that. That's all part of the decision as well.
Yeah, great.
Well said.
The decision to combine schools was also a way to better serve the community in terms of tax dollars. How does the bold plan affect our local taxpayers?
Well, first of all, as I said earlier, we're reducing overall operating costs of the district long term. However, it does require some funding to get this done, and for a home assessed at $100,000, it will cost the taxpayer $6.67 a year for the first 10 years, and after that it will level off and the increase will not occur. So there's a small cost to the taxpayer levy-wise, but long-term we'll have lower operational costs.
Gotcha. I know there are some that are worried that all the changes happening in the district could have a negative effect on student achievement. How can you confirm that this won't be the case?
I'll give you one example. When I went to talk to one of the buildings that was being combined, there was a teacher at one of the elementaries who's the only grade level teacher, 5th grade teacher at that building. And they were so excited that when the buildings combine, they will have a colleague to collaborate with on how to better serve students, to set up small groups and do better interventions and what the kids need, because they'll have other colleagues to work with at that grade level. So that's one way.
Okay.
We won't have it in those one-section schools. But secondly, we have all these social emotional supports kids need nowadays, whether it's nurses, social workers, psychologists. A lot of times we have to share those. By combining schools, we won't be sharing those resources, and there'll be designated people to serve that building.
And that's good to know, yeah. Well, do you have any final words? I know we talked a lot today. Do you have any other words to offer parents and families that may still be concerned about our school merges or any of the boundary changes?
Well, I just want to reinforce, if there is that perception out there we don't value your input, we are going to be providing you numerous opportunities to come and meet and see what the boundary changes are looking like, provide your input, and give some ideas to some people that may not even thought of yet. Nothing's been finalized. We would welcome your input and your thoughts about how to best structure our district to best serve our kids in our community.
Well, thanks, Paul. That concludes this episode of Here We Go Fregeau. We appreciate you for taking the time to answer these questions for the community. I know it's a great way for our community to hear straight from the district, so I think this is a valuable resource and appreciate your time.
Yes, I hope people appreciate it, and I hope we get good feedback on this approach to engaging our community.
That's right. If anyone that's out there listening, if you have any ideas for topics on a future podcast with Dr. Fregeau, please leave a comment or a private message on our Facebook page. And as always, thanks for listening. Have a good day.